Tonight, we're drifting into the real story behind Santa Claus, where he came from and how he became the figure we all recognize today. When you think of Christmas, there's a figure that arrives long before the presents, long before the tree is decorated, even long before December begins.
He lives in the background of winter, in shop windows, in childhood memories, in the stories we were told long before we understood what holidays even were.
A familiar shape in red, a soft laugh, a gloved hand raised as if he's always mid-greeting. Santa isn't just a character. He's a feeling, a kind of warmth that slips into the coldest months of the year and makes them gentler. Before we begin, let's take a moment to breathe together. We'll use a simple box breath. In for 4, hold for 4,
Out for 4.
and hold again for 4.
Ready?
Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Let your shoulders drop.
Let the story meet you exactly where you are.
Santa, the person we picture today, didn't appear all at once. He wasn't born in the North Pole, and he didn't always look the way he does now. His story is older, messier, more human than the perfect round figure in advertisements. And strangely enough, the Santa we imagine on Christmas Eve is the result of a long chain of stories, traditions, reinventions, and even clever marketing decisions. A character shaped by people across continents and centuries until he grew into something bigger than any of them. Bigger than myth, even. He became an emotion. Tonight, we're going to trace that journey, slowly, gently, from the very first spark of the legend, all the way to the Santa we know today. Not the loud, cartoonish version, but the softer one you find in old illustrations or in the glow of fairy lights. The one that feels almost real when you're small and pleasantly nostalgic when you're grown. Long before Santa had a sleigh or reindeer, there was a man named Nicholas. Not a jolly figure in red, but a 4th century bishop living in a world without electricity, without modern holidays, without any of the trappings we associate with Christmas. His story began in a coastal town in what is now Turkey. Nicholas was young when he became known for his quiet generosity, slipping gifts to people in need, helping families anonymously, offering small acts of kindness without ever signing his name to them. People told stories about his goodness. Stories spread, changed shape, grew larger, as stories do. And over time, Nicholas became Saint Nicholas, a beloved figure across Europe, especially in places like the Netherlands and Germany. But even then, he didn't look like the Santa you know. He wore long robes, not a red suit. He rode a donkey, not a sleigh. And he came not on Christmas Eve, but on December 6th, St. Nicholas Day, leaving small gifts in children's shoes. It wasn't until Europeans carried their traditions to the New World that the legend began to transform. In Dutch communities, St. Nicholas was called Santa Claus, a name that, over time, softened and reshaped itself into Santa Claus. And in this reshaping, the character started to drift away from the figure of the bishop and towards something more magical, more childlike, more universal. By the early 1800s, American writers had started to weave new layers into the story. They imagined Santa not as a solemn saint, but as a cheerful, round traveler who visited homes at night, carrying gifts for children. Illustrators began sketching him, at first differently each time, experimenting with shapes and colors. Some drew him tall and thin, others short and round. Some gave him a long green coat, others dressed him in brown or blue. It was a period of creative confusion, like the character was trying on different versions of himself, none of them quite right yet. And then, slowly, the pieces started falling into place. Poems like A Visit from St. Nicholas painted Santa as a jolly figure who arrived on a tiny sleigh pulled by reindeer. An illustrator named Thomas Nast began refining that image in magazines, giving Santa a recognizable silhouette, round, warm, kind, wrapped in fur against the snow. Each version brought him a little closer to the figure in your mind. And still, he wasn't fully formed. The final, lasting image, the Santa you see in films, cards, decorations, and childhood dreams, would come later, shaped by a world preparing to enter the modern age, and a brand that understood the power of nostalgia better than anyone else. But before we get there, before the red suit becomes iconic, before Santa moves to the North Pole and gains an army of toy-making elves, we need to linger a little longer in this space where myth meets memory, a moment where the legend is still soft and flexible, shifting between cultures, finding his voice, discovering who he is meant to be. That's where the magic really begins. As the 19th century unfolded, the figure of Santa kept evolving, shaped gently by writers, artists, and the growing desire for a warm, comforting symbol during winter. Cities were getting louder, streets busier. Technology was transforming daily life, and people seemed to crave a character who felt old, familiar, rooted in simpler times. Santa became that anchor. He wasn't tied to politics or religion or the anxieties of the modern world. He lived outside of all that, in a place made of memory and imagination.
Illustrator Thomas Nast, working for a magazine called Harper's Weekly, played one of the biggest roles in this transformation. Over several decades, he drew Santa again and again, each time refining the character. Nast made him rounder, warmer, a little mischievous, always surrounded by toys, letters, and maps of the world. He was the first to place Santa in the North Pole, a location that felt both remote and magical, a place untouched by time. Nast even sketched Santa reading lists of children's names, a detail that would become one of the most iconic parts of the modern myth.
People loved these illustrations. They cut them out of newspapers, They showed them to their children, and slowly, Santa became a shared cultural image, not just a saint or a folktale, but a personality, friendly, generous, a little rounder than before, but in a comforting way, like the softness of a winter blanket.
Still, Santa's appearance wasn't consistent yet. Some artists drew him in browns or greens. Some imagined him tall and thin. In different countries, he carried different names, wore different outfits, or traveled with different companions. The version we know today was hovering just out of reach, like a puzzle missing one last piece.
That final piece came in the early 20th century, at a time when advertisers were beginning to understand that stories sell better than slogans. One company in particular leaned into this idea, Coca-Cola. They wanted a winter campaign that didn't feel cold or distant, something human, something warm, something that made people feel cozy during the darker months. When they looked for a character to place at the heart of their campaign, the answer was obvious: Santa.
They hired an artist named Haddon Sundblom, who began painting Santa for Coca-Cola's holiday advertisements starting in the 1930s. His version of Santa was different from all the earlier ones. He wasn't thin or mysterious. He wasn't dressed in dark, muted tones. Sundblom Santa was joyful and round, dressed in bright red, with rosy cheeks and a smile that seemed to glow from within. He looked like someone who truly loved giving gifts and sharing joy. Someone you might actually want to meet. This warm, welcoming image resonated instantly. Magazines printed the ads. Posters went up in shop windows. Children saw the smiling, red-suited Santa and believed without hesitation. And although Coca-Cola didn't invent Santa's red suit, that color already existed in older depictions. Sundblom's artwork cemented it in the global imagination. For many people, that version of Santa became the definitive one. The one that still appears in movies, storybooks, decorations, and holiday cards. The version that feels timeless even though he's less than a century old. As Santa's image solidified, the world around him changed. Christmas became more commercial, more global. Lights, music, gift exchanges, family rituals, all these traditions grew, blended, and adapted. But Santa stayed steady. He didn't judge. He didn't age. He didn't belong to one culture or one faith. He lived in a safe, nostalgic space where childhood wonder could survive adulthood. Children wrote letters to him. Parents whispered stories late at night. Films brought him to life in new ways, softening him, making him gentle and approachable. In one era, he was a quiet, wise figure from the North Pole. In another, he was a jolly, laughing character who waved from parade floats. And somehow he fit both roles effortlessly. He could be magical or grounded, ancient or new, depending on what people needed. By the time the mid-20th century arrived, Santa wasn't just a myth. He had become a cultural companion, a symbol of warmth during the coldest season. Something about him made people slow down, even for a moment. He wasn't real in the literal sense, but emotionally, he was one of the realest figures of. Parents kept the story alive, not because they wanted to deceive their children,
but because they understood how rare it is to feel genuine wonder. Santa became a bridge between childhood and adulthood, between fantasy and memory, between the person you were and the person you've become.
And even now, years later, when you see a Santa figure in a shop window or hear a familiar sleigh bell in a Christmas movie, something inside you softens a little. The legend still works just as it did centuries ago. Not because of magic, exactly, but because we all want to believe in something gentle, something kind, something that makes the dark months feel brighter.
Santa gives us that feeling every single year.
By the time the modern image of Santa settled into place, something interesting was happening around him. The world was speeding up. Cities were growing, technology advancing, families becoming busier, and life becoming more complex. Yet every December, Santa remained untouched by all that noise. He existed in a slower rhythm, in the glow of warm lights, in the hush of winter evenings. And maybe that's why he became so emotionally powerful. He offered a pause, a moment of softness in a world that rarely stopped.
As Christmas traditions continued to evolve, Santa adapted effortlessly. In some countries, he arrived on the evening of the 24th, sliding down chimneys and leaving gifts under decorated trees. In others, he knocked at the door, almost politely, and handed presents directly to children. In some homes, he filled stockings. In others, he left handwritten notes. But his personality was always the same: patient, warm, generous, and infinitely forgiving. A character who represented the best parts of human kindness. The stories surrounding him grew richer. Children began leaving milk and cookies as a thank you. Parents wrote replies to letters in a handwriting that looked just magical enough. Reindeer gained names, each with their own personality. North Pole workshops became vibrant fantasy spaces with snow, elves, wooden toys, and glowing lanterns. The myth expanded, not because it needed to, but because people loved filling it with details that made it feel real. And then cinema arrived, the perfect medium for bringing Santa to life.
Early films presented him as a gentle visitor, a grandfatherly figure who moved quietly through snow-filled nights. Later, as Hollywood embraced Christmas stories, Santa became more lively, more expressive, sometimes even humorous. Each actor and animator added new layers to the myth, creating moments that would stay in the public imagination for years. Santa waving from a sleigh in a parade, Santa whispering to reindeer, Santa carefully reading letters by candlelight.
Children watched these scenes with absolute belief. Adults watched them with nostalgia. And slowly, Christmas movies created their own universe of warmth. One where Santa always arrived right on time, no matter how chaotic the world outside became. But perhaps the most striking thing about Santa isn't the legend itself, but how deeply personal he becomes in each individual life. Every person has their own version of him, shaped by their childhood home, their family traditions, the movies they grew up with,
the decorations they remember from their own December nights. For some, Santa means waking up early and running to the tree in pajamas. For others, it means a quiet evening with family, warm drinks, soft lights, and the promise of something magical in the air. And even as people grow older, as responsibilities take the place of childhood wonder, Santa doesn't truly disappear. He becomes quieter, more subtle. You don't expect him to land on your roof anymore, but the feeling he represents, the softness, the generosity, the sense of possibility, stays with you. It comes back through small things, a familiar song, a red ribbon, the smell of pine, the first cold evening of December.
If you're enjoying this and you'd like more calm stories like this, you're very welcome to join the channel.
Santa is less a person and more a memory you get to revisit each year.
In families, the tradition passes from one generation to the next almost effortlessly. Parents recreate the magic for their children, even if they're exhausted or stressed or overwhelmed. They hide gifts, wrap presents late at night, nibble strategically on cookies to leave evidence. And when the children grow older, they understand, not with disappointment, but with a kind of tenderness. They realize that the magic wasn't a lie. It was effort, love, time, someone waking up early to create a moment of joy.
And that realization changes everything.
It makes the myth stronger, not weaker, because suddenly Santa becomes something else entirely. A reminder of the people who cared enough to create magic for you. A symbol of warmth that doesn't fade, even when the world feels cold.
This emotional depth is one reason Santa remains untouched by trends. He exists outside of them. Brands can use him, movies can reinterpret him, decorations can commercialize him, but the core feeling stays the same. At his heart, Santa represents kindness for its own sake, a moment of generosity in winter, a little hope in a season that can otherwise be dark and quiet.
And maybe that's why he endures. Not because he's realistic or historically accurate, but because he fills a space in human nature that nothing else quite does. The part of us that wants to believe in something gentle. The part that softens in December. The part that remembers what it felt like to be small, waiting for a sound on the roof, convinced that magic was moving silently through the night.
Santa holds that memory for us, year after year.
As the legend of Santa Claus spread across Europe, it began to evolve in ways that reflected each culture's fears, hopes, and winter traditions. In some places, Saint Nicholas was still the gentle protector of children. In others, his image began to merge with older, pre-Christian figures, spirits of winter, ancient gift-bringers, and even stern guardians who kept order during the darkest nights of the year.
This blending wasn't accidental. Winter, especially in Northern Europe, was harsh and unforgiving. People spent long months fighting the cold, the darkness, and the uncertainty of survival. A figure who promised generosity or punishment became a powerful symbol. And so Santa developed a dual personality, the giver of gifts and the watcher who judged who deserved them.
By the 17th century, these traditions were carried into new territories. Dutch settlers arriving in North America brought with them Sinterklaas, a tall, dignified bishop who traveled by horse and handed out presents on December 6th. But in the New World, ideas mixed quickly. People from different countries shared stories, customs blended together, and characters transformed. The elegant Sinterklaas slowly became something more playful, more approachable, and eventually more familiar.
One of the major turning points came with the rise of printed media. Newspapers, pamphlets, and illustrated stories began circulating widely, shaping a new, unified image of Santa. Writers romanticized the figure, turning him into a kind, magical spirit who visited children not in daylight, but secretly during the quiet hours of the night. The mystery made him more enchanting, especially for children, and the image stuck.
This new Santa was starting to look a lot like the one we know today, but he still didn't have a fixed appearance. Some drawings showed him tall and thin, others short and round. Sometimes he wore bishop robes, other times a fur coat. The details changed depending on the illustrator, the country, and the audience. But the underlying message remained consistent. Santa represented hope, generosity, and the promise of joy during the darkest part of the year. He was no longer just a historical saint. He was becoming a cultural icon, a symbol that belonged not to one religion or one country, but to anyone who needed a little magic in winter. The evolution of Santa entered a new phase in the early 19th century, when American writers and illustrators began reshaping the figure in ways that blended folklore, creativity, and a growing fascination with childhood. Until then, Santa had been a patchwork of traditions, part saint, part winter spirit, part folk character. But in the United States, he found a cultural environment ready to give him a more defined identity.
One of the earliest influences came from Washington Irving, who had a talent for reinventing old stories. In a series of playful essays, he depicted the Dutch Sinterklaas as a jolly, pipe-smoking figure who soared above New York in a flying wagon. It wasn't meant to be a definitive version of the character. Irving liked to parody and exaggerate, but his descriptions stuck. They made Santa feel less distant, more human, and far more whimsical.
Then, in 1823, something happened that would change Christmas forever. A poem titled A Visit from St. Nicholas appeared anonymously in a newspaper. Today, it's known as "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." At the time, it was just a charming holiday piece, but it introduced details that became foundational. The sleigh pulled by 8 reindeer, the secret arrival in the middle of the night, the bag of toys, and the warm, round figure with twinkling eyes. It turned Santa into a character children could imagine vividly, not just a figure they heard about, but someone they could picture stepping quietly into their home. The poem spread rapidly. Newspapers reprinted it every December. Families memorized it, and illustrations soon followed. Each artist added their own interpretation, but the overall silhouette remained recognizable.
a joyful, plump traveler, friendly and approachable, who brought a sense of wonder rather than solemnity. One artist, Thomas Nast, left an especially deep mark on Santa's image. Throughout the late 1800s, Nast published dozens of Christmas illustrations, each one refining the character further. He introduced the idea of the North Pole Workshop, a place outside the borders of any country, where Santa crafted toys with the help of elves. He also sketched the famous naughty or nice list, giving children the sense that their actions throughout the year mattered. Even Santa's red suit, which would later become iconic, began to consolidate in Nast's drawings, though it wasn't yet standardized.
As these images circulated, Santa's identity became less tied to religious tradition and more connected to the emerging idea of childhood as a magical, protected space. Winter was still cold and dark, but Santa represented a light that families could share. He became a reminder that joy could enter homes quietly, even during the hardest months of the year.
Meanwhile, Christmas itself was transforming. Industrialization was changing daily life, cities were growing, and families found comfort in rituals that brought them together. Santa fit perfectly into this shift. He was a character who invited imagination, generosity, and a sense of belonging. And although his appearance varied from artist to artist, the essence remained the same. He was kind, he was timeless, and he arrived when people needed him most. By the end of the 19th century, Santa had become a fully formed cultural figure. Not yet the global icon we know today, but unmistakably the character who would soon step into that role.
As the 20th century began, Santa Claus was already a beloved figure in the United States, but he was still a character in evolution. His appearance, his habits, even the meaning behind his magical presence, all of these were being shaped by writers, artists, and a rapidly changing world. New technologies, new industries, and new ways of communicating would soon take Santa from a popular holiday figure to a global icon recognizable in nearly every country.
One of the first major forces in this transformation was the rise of mass-market consumer culture. At the beginning of the 1900s, department stores were becoming central attractions in big cities. These stores didn't just sell goods, they sold experiences. Holiday shopping became a special moment, and retailers quickly understood the emotional power of associating Christmas with visual magic. Santa, with his joyful personality and connection to giving, became the perfect ambassador.
That's why one of the earliest modern versions of Santa appeared not in a storybook, but in a store window. Large retailers began hiring actors to portray Santa during the holiday season. They decorated their shops with elaborate displays, creating miniature winter wonderlands to draw families inside. Children lined up to meet Santa in person, to whisper their wishes, and to feel a sense of excitement that turned a simple visit into a cherished memory. For many kids, it was the first time Santa became real. They weren't just reading about him, they were shaking his hand.
This shift helped cement Santa's role as a central figure in the Christmas season. His image became associated not only with tradition and folklore, but also with the modern idea of holiday celebration. Gifts, decorations, family gatherings, and festive outings. For the first time, Santa was connecting generations. Parents who had grown up with one version of him,
were bringing their children to a new, more defined one.
Meanwhile, printed media continued shaping how people imagined Santa. Magazines published vibrant holiday illustrations, and newspapers ran Christmas stories featuring a version of Santa that was becoming increasingly standardized. Round, cheerful, with a long white beard and a distinctive sense of warmth. The imagery reinforced rituals too. Hanging stockings, leaving cookies, writing letters. These small traditions made the myth more interactive. Children weren't just waiting for Santa. They were preparing for him, participating in the story.
Then a major turning point came with the rapid growth of professional advertising. Early in the 20th century, companies realized they could use Santa to promote everything from candies to toys to household goods. His personality, generous, friendly, familiar, made him a powerful marketing tool. And while some purists worried that the commercialization of Santa might dilute his symbolic meaning, the opposite happened. His popularity exploded. Santa became a fixture in magazine ads, postcards, catalogs, and eventually radio commercials. Each appearance reinforced the image of a benevolent figure who brought joy and celebration. He was no longer just a character connected to folklore. He was part of everyday culture during the holiday months. But Santa's transformation wasn't driven only by nostalgia or marketing. The early 20th century was a time of global conflict and economic hardship. During World War I, and especially during the Great Depression, Santa took on an even deeper meaning. Families struggling with scarcity found comfort in traditions that offered stability. Santa represented hope, a reminder that generosity mattered, even when times were difficult. During the 1930s, letters addressed to Santa surged in post offices around the United States. Children wrote about their needs as much as their wishes. Many asked for basic necessities, shoes, gloves, warm coats. These letters moved volunteers, community groups, and even postal workers to organize efforts to help families in need. Without planning it, Santa became a symbol of solidarity. He was a reminder that even in the hardest times, people could look out for one another. The expansion of Santa's persona continued in parallel with technological advancements. Radio drama brought him into living rooms as a voice, giving families the thrill of hearing stories about the North Pole, the elves, or Santa's preparations for the big night. These broadcasts helped children feel connected to the myth throughout December, building anticipation day by day. However, the biggest change came with the rise of illustrated advertising in the mid-20th century. Improvements in printing technology allowed for vibrant colors and detailed imagery, making Santa more visually expressive than ever before. He appeared everywhere, on billboards, in catalogs, in seasonal campaigns. Different artists brought different touches. Some made him slimmer, others more robust. Some emphasized his jolly face, others his elegance. But across all these versions, common elements remained consistent: the red suit, the white beard, the friendly demeanor, the sense of warmth and cheer. Then came a moment that would define Santa's image for generations: the creation of the Coca-Cola Christmas advertisements. Beginning in the 1930s, illustrator Haddon Sundblom crafted a version of Santa that was instantly memorable, full-cheeked, joyful, glowing with warmth. Dressed in the red and white suit
that would become instantly associated with him. These images were so widely distributed that many people mistakenly believe Coca-Cola invented the modern Santa. In reality, the company didn't create Santa's look, but it did play a massive role in standardizing it and spreading it around the world. Sundblom Santa was more than an advertisement. He was comforting, approachable, and unmistakably kind. His expressions captured a sense of holiday wonder that resonated deeply with families. And because Coca-Cola's marketing reached far beyond the United States, this version of Santa crossed borders rapidly. Within a few decades, he appeared on posters, cards, and displays in dozens of countries, becoming the default image recognized almost everywhere.
What made this depiction so effective wasn't just its charm, it was its consistency. For the first time, people across different cultures saw the same Santa with the same expression, posture, and style. The result was a global unification of the character. Even in countries that didn't celebrate Christmas, the image became familiar, often associated more with winter festivities than with religious tradition.
At the same time, Santa stories in books and films deepened the myth. In movies, Santa became a character with a personality, struggles, and moments of humor. He could be tired, surprised, overwhelmed, or playful. These portrayals made him even more human, even more relatable. Santa wasn't just an idea. He was someone audiences could root for.
Meanwhile, children's traditions expanded. Writing letters to Santa became a ritual not only in the United States, but across Europe, South America, and parts of Asia. Some countries developed postal programs, allowing kids to receive replies. Others created special stamps or mailboxes dedicated to Santa, turning the act of writing into a moment of shared community excitement.
By the mid-20th century, Santa Claus was no longer a myth confined to folklore. He had become a universal symbol, capable of adapting to each generation's hopes and challenges. He represented generosity, magic, imagination, and the comfort of rituals that return every year, no matter what is happening in the world.
This adaptability was key. As society changed, Santa changed with it. After World War II, when families sought stability and joy after years of uncertainty, Santa became the heart of a new post-war Christmas that emphasized family unity, home life, and simple pleasures. Television specials began appearing, showing Santa in animated form, further cementing his place in modern culture. These specials were replayed annually, creating traditions that parents passed down to their children.
The beauty of Santa's evolution is that he never abandoned his roots. The generosity of St. Nicholas, the wonder of winter folklore, the imaginative leap of Irving and Nast, the emotional comfort provided during hard times, all of these elements remained inside the character, layered together to create a figure who felt timeless.
By the time the second half of the 20th century arrived, Santa Claus was more than a holiday symbol. He was a cultural phenomenon, a character who belonged to childhood but was cherished by adults, a figure shaped by centuries of storytelling, yet still capable of adapting to the present, and above all, a reminder that hope and kindness can find their place even in the coldest season of the year. As the second half of the 20th century unfolded, Santa Claus increasingly found himself woven into the fabric of modern life. He was no longer merely a character who appeared once a year in stories or shop windows. He had become one of the most recognizable symbols of joy and generosity across the globe. This period marked the rise of television, mass media, and new forms of storytelling, all of which contributed to Santa's expansion into a full-scale cultural icon. Television, especially, played a central role in defining Santa for a new generation. In the 1960s and 70s, classic holiday specials began airing annually, becoming staples of family traditions. Productions like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman, and Santa Claus is Coming to Town introduced children to a warm, musical, and often humorous vision of Santa. These specials weren't just entertainment. They helped create emotional rituals that repeated every December. Watching Santa prepare for Christmas became an event families looked forward to year after year.
These shows also added depth to Santa's persona. They explored his origins, his relationships with the elves, his challenges in delivering gifts, and even the obstacles he had to overcome. For many children, these stories created a richer understanding of who Santa was, not just a magical figure who appeared one night a year, but a character with a life, a world, and a heart. He became less abstract and more like a comforting presence who returned predictably, no matter what had changed during the year.
At the same time, the growing popularity of holiday music contributed to Santa's presence everywhere. Songs like Here Comes Santa Claus, Santa Baby, and I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus turned him into a playful part of the soundtrack of December. He was no longer confined to bedtime stories or decorations. He was on the radio, in shopping centers, at school recitals, on TV commercials. Hearing songs about Santa throughout the winter season helped cement the atmosphere of anticipation that surrounded Christmas. Meanwhile, Santa's role in public life expanded dramatically. Cities around the world introduced Christmas parades featuring Santa as the final guest of honor. These parades became traditions in themselves, drawing thousands of spectators eager to see the moment when Santa appeared, waving from a float, marking the unofficial start of the holiday season. In some places, these events grew so iconic that they became tourist attractions. People traveled specifically to witness the magic. But this period also revealed something important about Santa: his ability to adapt to different cultures while still maintaining a consistent global image. As Christmas celebrations spread internationally through movies, music, and commercial culture, Santa entered countries with very different traditions. In some places, he blended with existing folklore. In others, he became a new symbol altogether. His universality, the idea that he represented kindness, joy, and the spirit of giving, allowed him to transcend borders with surprising ease. In Japan, for example, where Christmas was not traditionally celebrated, Santa found a home as a figure of winter joy rather than religious significance. In Brazil, he became known as Papai Noel, often imagined wearing lighter clothes because of the summer heat. In parts of Europe, Santa coexisted with older traditions such as the Christkind or the Three Kings, creating a mosaic of festive customs.
The flexibility of the character allowed each culture to interpret him in a way that felt personal and meaningful. This ability to cross borders was amplified by global marketing. As multinational companies expanded, I used Santa in their holiday campaigns, creating advertisements that appeared in newspapers, on billboards, and later on television screens around the world. His face began showing up in places far from the snowy landscapes usually associated with him. Beaches, tropical cities, deserts, reinforcing the message that Santa wasn't tied to a specific climate or country. He became truly global, a figure everyone could instantly recognize.
In the midst of this expansion, Santa continued to play an important role in shaping childhood experiences. The tradition of writing letters to Santa grew stronger, supported by special postal programs that allowed children to receive responses. Some countries created dedicated Santa post offices where volunteers answered letters. In Canada, the Postal Service designated a unique address for Santa, HOHHOH, a playful imitation of his famous laugh. The idea that Santa was reachable, that he could be communicated with, strengthened the emotional bond children felt with him.
Santa also influenced how families organized their own traditions. The preparation for his arrival became part of the holiday excitement. Decorating the tree, hanging stockings, baking cookies, leaving carrots for the reindeer. These rituals were passed down through generations, giving a sense of continuity and belonging. Even families who celebrated modestly found joy in these simple acts. Santa was not about grand gestures. He was about anticipation, wonder, and the shared belief that magic could enter a home.
With time, Santa also became a figure of charity and social responsibility. Many organizations used his image to promote holiday giving, encouraging donations to children in need. Toy drives, fundraisers, and community events adopted Santa as a symbol of compassion. His association with generosity made him a natural ambassador for acts of kindness, reinforcing the idea that the holidays were a time for thinking of others.
This era also brought a new dimension to Santa's identity: humor. In films and television shows, Santa occasionally appeared as a comedic character, sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes confused by modern life, sometimes dealing with mischievous elves or malfunctioning to laugh, struggle, and enjoy surprises, much like the families who celebrated him.
Then came a crucial moment in Santa's evolution: the digital age. As computers, the internet, and later smartphones became part of everyday life, Santa adapted yet again. He appeared in online games, animations, websites, and interactive experiences. Children could track Santa's journey around the world through apps and web platforms that simulated his flight on Christmas Eve. This innovation created a new kind of excitement, one rooted in technology rather than storytelling alone. Families gathered around screens to watch Santa move across the map, turning Christmas Eve into a shared global event.
Email replaced handwritten letters for some children, and virtual Santa chats appeared on websites. Personalized video messages from Santa became a popular tradition, reaching children across continents instantly. Social media added another layer. Santa became a character who could post or comment, keeping his presence alive throughout the season.
Yet, despite these modern changes, the core of Santa's identity remained intact.
Technology didn't replace the myth. It simply gave families new ways to interact with it. The heart of the story stayed the same. A figure who rewarded kindness, embodied generosity, and appeared in the darkest days of winter to bring joy and hope.
Perhaps the most remarkable part of Santa's journey through the late 20th century was his ability to remain both timeless and modern. He represented tradition, yet he fit easily into movies, advertisements, and pop culture. He carried centuries of history, yet he never felt outdated. He moved between folklore, art, commerce, entertainment, and charity with seamless grace.
By the time the world entered the 21st century, Santa Claus had become one of the most enduring characters ever created. He didn't belong to a single story, a single country, or a single culture. He belonged to everyone who believed in the magic of the season. Whether depicted in a snowy landscape, on a tropical beach, in animated films, or in high-tech holiday apps, Santa continued to symbolize something that transcended trends. The simple but powerful idea that kindness matters.
And even as everything around him changed, technology, society, the way families celebrated, Santa remained constant. A figure who arrived reliably every year, bringing with him not just gifts, but a feeling that the world, even if just for a moment, could pause, breathe, and celebrate joy.
As the world entered the 21st century, Santa Claus found himself at the intersection of tradition and innovation. For centuries he had lived in stories, illustrations, and winter customs, but now he stepped into a digital landscape that was transforming how people communicated, celebrated, and imagined. Yet even with the rise of smartphones, streaming platforms, and global connectivity, Santa didn't become outdated. Instead, he adapted effortlessly, proving once again that his magic could survive any cultural shift. The internet was one of the first forces to reshape the way families engaged with Santa. Suddenly, he wasn't limited to bedtime stories, shopping mall visits, or holiday specials on television. Entire digital universes sprang up around him. Online North Poles filled with animated workshops, interactive maps, and playful games starring elves and reindeer. Children could explore these worlds with a click, discovering new details about Santa's life, far beyond what earlier generations had imagined. It was as if the myth had been given room to expand in countless directions.
One of the most beloved innovations was the tradition of tracking Santa on Christmas Eve. Organizations and websites created real-time maps showing Santa's sleigh soaring across the globe. Families gathered around their screens, refreshing the page to see which city he'd fly over next. It became an annual ritual, a merging of ancient wonder and modern technology. Millions of people watched together, turning Santa's journey into a shared global event.
New digital tools also made Santa feel more personal. For the first time, parents could create custom video messages where Santa addressed children by name, praised their accomplishments, or offered gentle reminders to behave. These videos arrived by email or smartphone, and their impact was immediate. To many children, it felt like Santa truly knew them.
The myth grew warmer, closer, and more emotionally detailed, without losing its mystery.
As technology continued advancing, Santa appeared in new contexts everywhere. Social media channels posted behind-the-scenes glimpses of the North Pole during December. Apps featured Santa sightings, countdown calendars, and digital advent games. Even virtual assistants added Santa-themed features, allowing families to ask questions or hear stories during the holiday season. These innovations didn't replace traditional customs. They supplemented them, giving families more ways to feel connected to the season.
Global communication also transformed how countries celebrated Christmas, and Santa moved fluidly through diverse cultures. Whether appearing in snowy northern towns or in warm coastal cities, he adapted naturally to local customs. In some places, he arrived by sleigh, in others by boat, train, or even helicopter. Videos of these regional interpretations traveled widely, showing how the same figure could be woven in countless environments. The core of the myth stayed intact, a benevolent figure bringing joy in winter.
Modern films played a major role in expanding Santa's personality. Holiday movies portrayed him in different moods: wise, humorous, overwhelmed, determined, turning him into a fully developed character rather than a distant symbol. Some films explored his early life. Others imagined the daily operations of his workshop. Others centered on the challenges of delivering gifts in a chaotic modern world. These movies kept the myth alive by exploring new facets of a character who had grown larger than any single story.
Television specials, both animated and live action, continued their nostalgic role. Families returned to classic films year after year, treating them like emotional bookmarks in their personal histories. Children discovered these films through streaming services, while adults revisited them for the comfort they brought. Santa, appearing in each story with familiar warmth, became a bridge between past and present. In parallel with entertainment, Santa maintained a strong presence in public life. Holiday parades drew crowds eager to see Santa appear at the finale, waving from a decorated float as he officially opened the Christmas season. Cities staged elaborate tree lighting ceremonies where Santa made special appearances. Shopping centers continued the tradition of Santa visits, transforming simple photo sessions into magical experiences with immersive sets and festive storytelling.
And through all these public appearances, Santa retained another important role, that of a charitable figure. Many communities organized toy drives and holiday fundraisers in his name. Volunteers dressed as Santa visited hospitals, schools, and shelters, offering comfort to children facing difficult circumstances. These moments reinforced the oldest part of Santa's legacy, the act of giving. Long before sleighs, reindeer, and red suits, the spirit behind Santa was rooted in generosity, and that spirit remained central even in the modern age. This period also revealed something essential about the myth. Santa endured because he offered emotional stability in an unpredictable world. Families going through economic hardship, global crises, or personal challenges found comfort in traditions that repeated every year without fail. Baking cookies, decorating the tree, watching favorite movies,
reading classic stories. These rituals created a rhythm that anchored people in moments of joy and connection. During times of global uncertainty, Santa's presence became especially meaningful. Even when celebrations had to be smaller or adapted, the figure of Santa provided hope. Videos emerged of Santa greeting children from rooftops, waving from a safe distance, or appearing in virtual events. The message was clear. The magic could adjust to circumstances without disappearing. And this adaptability is one of the reasons Santa remains one of the most enduring cultural figures in the world. His story can stretch across centuries, yet still feel contemporary. His image can appear in illustrations from the 1800s, in mid-century films, and on modern digital platforms, all without losing coherence. Santa reflects something timeless, the desire for hope in the darkest season of the year, the excitement of anticipation, the value of generosity, and the joy of imagination.
Today, Santa exists in many forms simultaneously. A legendary figure, a character in beloved films, a presence in parades, a digital icon in apps, a memory from childhood, and a symbol of winter celebration. Children meet him in shopping centers, watch him in animations, or wave to him in community events. Adults recognize him from their own childhoods, surprised by how familiar he still feels. Families continue to build traditions around him, from decorating the tree to opening advent calendars, writing letters, or reading stories on Christmas Eve. Santa's strength lies not in any single version of him, but in the emotion he evokes. He represents the quiet belief that the coldest night can bring warmth, that kindness can travel far, that wonder still has a place in modern life. He is a reminder that some rituals are worth keeping, not because they are old, but because they connect people to each other. As long as families gather, as long as people celebrate winter by sharing small moments of joy, as long as the world desires a figure who symbolizes generosity and hope, Santa will remain. His story will continue to grow, shaped by new technologies, new customs, and new memories, yet always guided by the same spirit that began centuries ago. In the end, Santa endures because he represents a simple and universal idea that even in the darkest season, light can be carried forward by human imagination, kindness, and the timeless pleasure of believing in a